brand new podcast.
Yes.
And thought that they were probably going to come away with, oh, well, we kicked Dane Brandy's ass. So you guys were pretty bold back in the day.
Oh man. That episode is a great episode. If I can ever find it to re-upload it, cause I'm not sure if it's actually on the internet still. It was one of those things where I said shit to James Randi that I'm like, why would I have ever said that? Like, I tried to use like laws of thermodynamics on him. Like, well, if physics says that energy can't be created nor destroyed, what happens to the energy that we're exerting off in our bodies right now when we die? I tried doing that stupid type of stuff. And, Randy schooled me, very politely though. But I just want to get back to to my deconversion story really quick. So
yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I just wanted to point out how you guys were that damn sure you knew what you were doing.
Jason, when we don't have enough stories to do on the show, Jason likes to go back to our old articles and our old, what he calls case files, and we like to make asses of ourselves now on the show. And one of the articles that Jason wrote was something along the lines like, how I'm going to prove to the science world that ghosts exist. I mean, what a bold claim to make. And, we read them on the show and we totally make fun of ourselves.
And we won't go into the annual, Halloween episode for October and you and demonology.
Oh yes.
You guys, I would implore all of the listeners that are listening to this show to go over, just Google it, you'll find it.
Yeah.
StrangeFrequencyRadio.net, and just Google what's the best keywords you think, Halloween episodes or something like that, and just listen to Bobby just groan every Halloween.
Yes. Exorcisms, Ouija boards, Strange Frequencies Radio. Oh, it's terrible. But
not from my end. I was laughing my butt off.
But I started to use the same skeptical reasoning that I used in ghosts, and I started applying it to my faith. And so I went. What every good Christian should do, as what I thought is, when you're in the wilderness, go to your pastor. Go to the shepherd, the person that's supposed to tend to the flock. And I had a question, and I still think that my question is a decent question. And I said to both of my pastors, I sent them both an email, and I said, listen, I'm having a hard time. And I still remember almost maybe not exactly, but this is the basics of it. I said, my entire life I've been taught that in the beginning God made angels, and that somewhere along these lines, even though this isn't biblical, this is still something that's taught. It was at least taught to us in our at my Christian school that in the beginning God created angels, and then somewhere along the lines, even though God knew, because he's omniscient, he's all knowing, that he knew that before creating these angels that some were going to rebel, and he was going to cast them into hell. And then he made man, and he gave man the Garden of Eden, and he let man think that we could keep the Garden of Eden, although he knew prior to making us that we were going to fail at that task. So in a sense, he's a liar right there. He's letting us believe that we can do something that he knows we'll fail at. So then we fail, and we get kicked out of the Garden of Eden, and the wages of sin are death, and God gives us the law, and he lets us pretend like we could keep the law, knowing that we can't. So, for the next, few thousand years, God just sits there with his arms crossed, and he finally decides that the way that he's going to rectify the situation is by sending himself in the form of a man to sacrifice himself to himself to save us from himself. And I want to know why or how this makes sense.
And this is after the first hard reboot of the system itself,
Yes. And
so go ahead.
I wanted an answer. I thought I deserved an answer. This is the reason why I was starting to question my faith. And I got no response from one of my pastors, and these were both sent on Facebook. And in the Facebook messages, you can see when it says that it's been read. And so I saw that one did read it and then never responded back. Now, this is a person that has been responsible for my whole Christian upbringing and never responded back. And the other one said, you're just trying to start confrontation. You want to start an argument, and I'm not going to go there with you. Basically, have a good life. And I thought, wow.
So one just didn't want to talk at all about it, and the other just said, yeah, I acknowledge you have questions, but I'm just not going to.
Exactly. And
I'm not going to do anything at all about it.
Right. And the only thing that I can think of is that you can't answer that question. That question it does not make sense if you think of it that way. And so I did the one thing that I truly thought I could do to save my faith. I read the Bible.
Well, no, it's just what I was about to say. You read the Bible.
And I read it from Genesis to Revelation, something that I've never done before. I did this with every intention of strengthening my faith. When I got to Amen, it took me about 3 to 4 months to read the Bible. I read it every single day. When I closed it at Amen, I said out loud to my wife, I cannot believe a word of this. This is absolutely horrifying. Now mind you, this was probably, I'm 30, I'm going to be 32 here in a couple days. So this was probably when I was 27, 28.
Yeah.
And
I'd just like to point out that I know how much of a voracious reader that you are. So for you to go through a book like the Bible over 3 months, it wasn't just, you scanned through it. Again, like I said, I know you're a voracious reader. Yeah. So you were reading, rereading, researching. So this is 3 months of Bobby's life here we're talking about, listeners, because, that's just the way that he is. And I'm pretty sure you'll agree with that.
And absolutely. So like there were stories that I was amazed that there were stories in the Bible that I've never even heard of. I never heard of Jephthah's daughter, which is a horrifying story. I had never heard the story of I never heard the smashing of the heads of infants. I never heard stories about, go ahead and go into these villages and take the women and do anything you want with them. I never heard any of these things because they're conveniently left out of church services.
But even the popular ones, Abraham and his son, that's a popular one. And we're really talking about, he was just about to kill his son.
Yeah, but it's so easy to mental gymnastics over that. I mean, I can tell you right now, the way that you and I would look at that story now, as opposed to 10 years ago when I would look at that story, the story was, well, God was never going to actually allow it to happen, and somehow that makes it okay.
Yeah. Even though he told him to do it in the first place, which no decent human being.
Well, not even that. The guy was going to do it. Not even that God told him to do it. The guy was going to do it. That's what freaks me out. And Christopher, I think it was a while ago, maybe a couple years ago, you posted a picture, and I just saw it on our time on recent memories or whatever, and it was a cartoon of Christopher Hitchens giving the middle finger because God said, Hitch, it's God, and I want you to sacrifice one of your children because I told you to do it. And Hitches has his finger up, and it says "fuck you."
Yeah, I remember that well. I think that's actually whenever I posted that. That's whenever you and I actually became friends.
Yeah. Because I think about that, and I do ask that question to believer. I get in debates almost every single day, and that is one question that I love to ask believers. Is I say, listen, if you have a child, and I say, and you truly believe that you're hearing the voice of God, and God told you, listen, I know how much you love your child, but I need you to tie them down and stab them with a knife. Would you do it honestly? Most of the time, they say no. And I say that's because you are more moral than the God that you believe in. But I do get freaked out. I get really freaked out. There was a guy on one of our episodes. His name was Brett the Crazy Christian. I don't know if you were actually a listener at this time. This was a couple years ago. And this guy, at the end of the show, I asked that question, and he goes, if I knew it was God, I would absolutely take the life of my own child for him. And I said, well, usually I would end this segment by saying that is because you are more moral than the God that you believe in. Unfortunately for this show, I can't say that because that is the most scariest thing I've ever heard somebody actually say. But after him, I've heard numerous people say that they would do that. But
And that's truly frightening.
It's very frightening.
In the sense that they are in reality, if that was really the reality that we're living in, that is actually the truth. They wouldn't be moral than us, which is fucking frightening.
It's beyond frightening. I mean, it goes to show you, I guess, how poisonous religion can be. And we don't even need to use Christianity. I mean, this is all religions. I mean, we have people that are willing to cut your head off for their belief. And this happens every day.
And it's Judaism and Christianity, even, the Buddhists and Shintos, they all have these really weird beliefs.
Yes.
So, yeah.
So, but to get back after I closed the Bible, I said right then and there, I can never believe in this again. And I always when I talk to people, I always say that doesn't mean that God doesn't exist though. I'm perfectly capable and aware to say that it is not illogical for an all-knowing God to exist. It very well could be. But I will make the argument that he's not all-loving. So we can go ahead and get rid of that trait right away. And there was a show a couple weeks ago where we were playing around with the idea, if God was real and came down and sat next to me, and I could be 100% positive, and he did say, things like, I am the Christian God. And all you have to do is worship me and you'll get to heaven. I probably would, because I want to go to heaven. Although that's never going to happen, but
Well, let's go a little bit more in depth on that, because I remember that episode.
Yes. I actually asked you to listen to it.
Yeah, I did, and I responded, yes, you're correct. If there was something or some entity that came back and said, I remember this specific thought that you remember back, whenever you were 7 years old about this most obscure thing, and this is the reason why, you do all the mental gymnastics that you actually have to do to believe that, then yeah, I would agree, and Bobby's, I'm going to synopsize for you, I want to spend the rest of eternity with my family, with my loved ones. Yeah, if that could be objectively proven, yes, then I would worship that thing only for the reason that I want to hang out with my family for the rest of eternity.
Sure, if that didn't have a bearing on my entrance, I would. But just to play the mental gymnastic games, if I could ask him all the questions of all the horrific things that happen in the world, and he goes, hey man, listen, don't question me. Everything that happens is happening for a reason greater than you could ever understand. That might not be, it might not be satisfactory for my puny brain, but, I would have to accept that. But you see, when we play these games, you and I realize it's just a game. This is what people really believe. This is what they have to believe. And it's a non-answer. And now we can get serious about it. We ran out of time on the show, so we really didn't get into it. I hate non-answers to questions. So when I talk to people like a pastor and I ask those hard questions, and then they throw that question back on me, or they throw that answer at me, they'll say, well, you just don't understand the mind of God. And I go, that claim right there is a claim that you know the mind of God. You can't tell me I can't know the mind of something if you don't know it either. It doesn't make...
That's their position is literally a non sequitur.
Yes.
By definition, you cannot continue the conversation beyond you don't know the mind of God.
Right.
By its very definition, that's impossible to refuse.
Oh, so exactly. So I'll say back to them, I go, if that's the case, and I can't know the mind of God, you can't tell me that God is all loving, because there's no way that you can know the mind of God and I can't. So you can't sit here and tell me that God is all loving. You can't tell me that he's all knowing. You can't tell me that he's a jealous God. That's knowing the mind of God. So if you can't know the mind of God, you can't know those traits either. And then it gets quiet.
Go ahead.
And then after you say something like that, it gets quiet. And and
we've all had that experience before, where it's just like,
I don't know if they don't expect to get that answer back, because 95%, 99%, 98% of the time, saying that you don't understand the mind of God is a satisfactory answer to the person that they're talking to.